In order to completely eradicate the extraterritorial evil clan from this newly born domain world, all the powerful beings of the domain world gathered once again, led by the supreme ruler of the domain celestial court, Central Herdsman Master Mu Chen, along with the rulers of the boundless fire domain, Flame Emperor Xiao Yin, and Martial Realm Master, Martial Ancestor Lin Dong. Additionally, the ancestors of the primordial divine clan, the myriad spirit divine clan, the Futu ruler Qing Yanjing, and the martial realm matriarch Ling Qingzhu, all of whom are lower rulers, were present. All of them had arrived at the domain celestial court, which had been established just a few days earlier. Now, what was once known as the Great Thousand Worlds, the extraterritorial worlds, the various lower dimensional worlds, and the most secretive of realms, the Thousand Realms, were no more, replaced by the unified domain world. The domain celestial court, established by Central Herdsman Master Mu Chen, now represented the highest authority, controlling the entire domain world. On the vast square, thousands upon thousands of powerful beings gathered. Towering stone pillars stood on both sides of the square, with figures standing atop them. On the left side were Xiao Yin, Ling Qingzhu, and the ancestor of the myriad spirits. On the right were Lin Dong, Qing Yanjing, and the ancestor of the primordial divine clan. These 6 individuals represented the rulers of the domain world, while the thousands of others gathered below the stone pillars were under their protection and command. However, in the domain world today, the highest existence was another person. Chapter 1. Rooting out the evil. Everyone, I have gathered you here today, and the purpose is clear: to completely eradicate the extraterritorial evil clan from this world. The calm voice echoed across the square. On a square stone platform at the front stood a figure, the highest ruler of the domain world, Central Herdsman Master Mu Chen. Although wiping out the extraterritorial evil clan is something I can easily accomplish on my own, to prevent them from fleeing this world, I have already stripped all the powers of the former evil clan members. Whether they are the extraterritorial evil ancestor, the demon ancestor, the resurrected 9 evil saint emperor, or the malice spirit, all their abilities to alter the rules have been stripped away. However, over the past tens of thousands of years, the extraterritorial evil clan has caused immense destruction to the former Great Thousand Worlds and the lower dimensional worlds. Billions of lives were slaughtered, and no matter who they were, everyone inevitably harbored hatred for such a race. In the past, due to the overwhelming power of the extraterritorial evil clan, everyone could do nothing but defend themselves against them. But now it's different. They are lambs to the slaughter, unable to escape the fringe realms. Therefore, for this monumental act of completely eradicating the extraterritorial evil clan, I believe everyone should be allowed to participate. This is what the extraterritorial evil clan owes to all of you, and to simply erase them with the central herdsman's authority would be too merciful to them. Thus, I now officially declare that the power of life and death over the remnants of the extraterritorial evil clan trapped in the fringe realms will be entrusted to all of you here. Mu Chen's words rang in the ears of everyone in the square, and as they heard this, they were instantly filled with passionate fervor. After all, they could easily crush the power-defenseless evil clan members. It had been tens of thousands of years since anyone had been this decisive. Standing atop the stone pillars, Flame Emperor Xiao Yin, Martial Ancestor Lin Dong, and the others exchanged helpless smiles after hearing Mu Chen's words. Tens of thousands of years ago, the extraterritorial evil clan took 300 years to attack the Great Thousand Worlds. Although they ultimately failed, they dealt significant damage. This time, however, the world-ending war lasted only 3 years, and the extraterritorial evil clan fell into an irreversible abyss of defeat. Since the moment Mu Chen became the central herdsman, no one could save the extraterritorial evil clan. We are willing to follow Central Herdsman Master Mu Chen and eradicate the extraterritorial evil clan completely. We are willing to follow Central Herdsman Master Mu Chen and eradicate the extraterritorial evil clan completely. We are willing to follow Central Herdsman Master Mu Chen and eradicate the extraterritorial evil clan completely. The chants echoed across the square. Everyone present was at least at the Earth Supreme level, with several hundred heavenly supremes among them. With thousands of powerful beings chanting in unison, Even this newly born and more stable world trembled. Everyone responded to Central Herdsman Master Mu Chen's call. It was clear that the extraterritorial evil clan had planted a deep grudge in their hearts over these tens of thousands of years. Everyone wanted to personally destroy the remnants of the extraterritorial evil clan, and now Central Herdsman Master Mu Chen had granted their wish. However, as the cheers resounded, Central Herdsman Master Mu Chen stepped forward. He looked at Flame Emperor Xiao Yin, Martial Ancestor Lin Dong, and the other rulers atop the stone pillars and said, "Although we have achieved victory in this great war, we must not forget those who have fought to protect this world through the ages. Over the past tens of thousands of years, if it had not been for the ancestor of the primordial divine clan and the ancestor of the myriad spirits, who held the extraterritorial rulers at bay, the great thousand worlds would have long been destroyed, and the rulers of this world would undoubtedly have been the extraterritorial evil clan." Then, the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor also played decisive roles in our victory. Several years ago, it was the Flame Emperor who led the domain defense plan, catching the extraterritorial evil clan by surprise. As the vanguard, Martial Ancestor Lin Dong eradicated the entire 4,000 Great Demon clan, including the Demon Ancestor. The accomplishments of these two predecessors are beyond my own. Therefore, I hereby announce that the entire southern domain of this new world will be governed by Flame Emperor Xiao Yin and the Boundless Fire domain, while the northern domain will be under the jurisdiction of Martial Ancestor Lin Dong and the Martial Realm. Xiao Yin and Lin Dong exchanged a glance and smiled at each other from a distance, both cupping their hands in a gesture of respect. The newly born domain world was now at least twice as vast as the former Great Thousand World. Its sheer expanse was such that even a heavenly supreme from the earth would need nearly half a year to traverse it. The domain world was divided into the eastern domain, northern domain, western domain, southern domain, and central domain, with each domain spanning over 100 billion miles, equivalent to half of the former Great Thousand World. Yet now, the Central Herdsman Master had directly placed both the southern and northern domains under the control of the Endless Fire domain and the Martial Realm. This was clearly unexpected by everyone, but considering past events, it was clear that both the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor had received significant favors from the Central Herdsman Master. Thus, it seemed that the Central Herdsman Master was now repaying those debts. However, despite having gained control over the entire southern domain, Xiao Yan's smiling face hid a faint trace of helplessness and unwillingness, emotions that did not go unnoticed by the Central Herdsman Master. "Senior Flame Emperor, is there something on your mind?" asked the Central Herdsman Master directly. Xiao Yan shook his head. "Thank you for your concern, Central Herdsman Master. I was just reminiscing about some past events and felt a bit regretful. But now that this new world has been born, we should focus on what lies ahead." "Indeed, Senior Flame Emperor is right. We should focus on the present." The Central Herdsman Master nodded, then turned to look at the strong experts gathered in the plaza. His clear voice resonated loudly. "Everyone here, whether from the Domain Celestial Court, Endless Fire Domain, Martial Realm, or other sects and factions from now on, we are all part of the Domain World's great army. Our goal is the Edgelands, 100 billion miles away. There, we will cleanse the remnants of the extraterritorial evil clan. Now, let's get ready and set out. Move out." As night fell, somewhere in the Edgelands, an island stood alone in the vast, endless ocean. On this island, a group of power-deprived individuals were imprisoned. They were the remaining members of the extraterritorial evil clan. Months ago, after the total defeat of the extraterritorial evil clan, the Evil Ancestor, along with the Slaughter Ancestor, 9 Evil Saint Emperor, Malice Spirit, and all remaining clan members, had retreated here. This place had once been the extraterritorial world, but now, the extraterritorial world had fully merged into the domain world, and the evil chi that once lingered here had been nearly eradicated by the Central Herdsman Master. The Evil Ancestor and other rulers had lost their power to alter the rules, and the remaining demons, having lost their evil chi, were now incredibly weak. Even their physical strength had been stripped away. At this point, A single spiritual beast at the heaven-merging stage would be enough to wipe out all the remnants of the extraterritorial evil clan. In a forest, tens of thousands of black figures crouched, and in front of them stood 7 individuals. The evil Ancestor, Slaughter Ancestor, 9 evil Saint Emperor, Malice Spirit, and attendants, along with the resurrected Great Evil Saint Emperor and Great Slaughter Saint Emperor from a few months ago. They gazed at the remaining less than 30,000 members of the evil clan. Aside from the 2 great sacred emperors, Slaughter Ancestor and Malice Spirit, the other 3 showed no sign of emotion. Evil Ancestor, what should we do next? Malice Spirit asked. What else can we do? Let heaven decide our fate, the evil Ancestor replied, and the others around him slightly twitched, knowing that by heaven, the evil Ancestor was referring to the highest authority in the domain world, the central herdsman master. If it comes to it, we'll surrender, Slaughter Ancestor said helplessly. Slaughter Ancestor, are you out of your mind? 9 evil Saint Emperor mocked. He gestured at the remaining members of the evil clan and sneered. Look at this. Do you think they care whether we surrender or not? They don't care. Slaughter Ancestor shot a glance at 9 evil Saint Emperor, who had a close relationship with the evil Ancestor. He had always disliked him and thought, if only I had killed him earlier. Exactly, they don't care. In the past, we could destroy you without hesitation because our strength was subtly greater than theirs. Now, the tables have turned, 9 evil Saint Emperor said. They want to destroy us. What does it matter if we surrender? He continued. So, what should we do next? We should at least do something, even if it's useless, Malice Spirit asked. Good question. What should we do next? 9 evil Saint Emperor turned to the evil Ancestor. Evil Ancestor, can you read people? I can, the evil Ancestor answered. How many days do you think we have left? 9 evil Saint Emperor asked. The central herdsman master is young. If it's him, it could be 1 day at the shortest, 3 days at the longest. Evil Ancestor, what are you all doing? Slaughter Ancestor asked in confusion. We are calculating how long it will take for the central herdsman master to come and eradicate us, Evil Ancestor replied. Oh, you're even going that far? Slaughter Ancestor shook his head helplessly. It seems they have a sense of sentimentality, choosing to travel here on foot instead of using a teleportation array, the 9 evil Saint Emperor sneered. Heh, we've become the main course, and those chefs are getting ready to cook us. But at least we still have 1 more day. Sigh. What can we even do in a day? Slaughter Ancestor sighed unwillingly. There's plenty one can do in a day. You just don't know how to make use of it, the 9 evil Saint Emperor said. In a day, we could take a swim in the ocean. Granted, we don't run into any oceanic spiritual beasts. We could also sleep, though there's no guarantee we'd wake up. Dying in our sleep wouldn't be the worst outcome. Oh, and we could write plenty of poems in a day. Poems? Forget it. You call that poetry? Slaughter Ancestor scoffed with disdain. You simply lack appreciation, the 9 evil Saint Emperor retorted coldly. In the past, he wouldn't have dared to speak to Slaughter Ancestor like this. But now that they were equals, neither could threaten the other. He had nothing to fear. The 9 evil Saint Emperor is right. A day is more than enough to do many things. Let's start now. Evil Ancestor interrupted their exchange, his gaze fixed on a distant mountain peak. There's something we can do right this moment. Are you interested? What is it? Slaughter Ancestor and Malice Spirit both asked. Look. Evil Ancestor pointed toward the mountaintop where the vast night sky stretched above, filled with countless stars. A sky this clear. We rarely get to see such a thing. I want to climb up there and stargaze. Do you want to join me? The moment he spoke, silence fell over the group. The stillness lasted for several breaths before Slaughter Ancestor turned away first. I'm not going. No interest. We're about to be wiped out, and you still have the time for this? With that, he left. We're leaving too. Maybe we should dig our graves before the central herdsman master arrives. The great evil Saint Emperor and the great Slaughter Saint Emperor chuckled darkly before departing. You've never understood why you were born or why you exist. And now you care about why you're disappearing. Evil Ancestor remarked as he watched them go. Then, he turned to the 9 evil Saint Emperor. My great poet, would you care to join me in stargazing? The 9 evil Saint Emperor smiled. He recalled how, in a past life, in another world, he had once taken 2 girls to watch the stars. Strangely, despite always claiming they wanted a romantic stargazing experience, when the time actually came, they weren't interested in the stars at all. They didn't care whether Betelgeuse was on the verge of exploding, nor did they wonder about the actual distance between Vega and Altair, let alone whether extraterrestrial civilizations might exist around those distant stars. Let's go take a look, he said. I'll come too. Since this is the end, it doesn't matter what we do anymore. Might as well relax, said the silent servant, finally speaking up. You too, Evil Ancestor gestured toward Malice Spirit. Yes. Malice Spirit responded immediately. He had been trained by Evil Ancestor for years as his successor, and he always followed his master's word without question. And so, Evil Ancestor, Servant, Malice Spirit, and the 9 evil Saint Emperor began their climb toward the distant mountaintop. Having lost all their powers, they were no different from ordinary people. Even though the mountain was only 1,000 zhang high, the climb required every ounce of effort they had. This was likely the first time in their lives they had ever needed to struggle so hard just to climb a single peak. Yet when they reached the top, they realized that compared to the surrounding mountains and forests, this one was merely average in size. See? After all that effort, we get to witness something beautiful, the 9 evil Saint Emperor said, pointing up at the brilliant night sky. Above them, the Milky Way stretched across the heavens like a luminous river of light. In the past, with the limits of human eyesight, one could only see a few thousand stars at most. But now, the 9 evil Saint Emperor could see tens of thousands, including many of the brightest stars in the sky. Why is it so breathtaking? Evil Ancestor murmured in awe. He had seen the night sky countless times before, but tonight was the most beautiful it had ever been. The 4 of them, led by the Evil Ancestor, began chatting atop the mountain, gazing at the brilliant starry sky. They seemed entirely unconcerned about the impending destruction. Juxi, do you remember what you first told me about? The Evil Ancestor asked, sitting cross-legged on a stone at the mountain's peak. Was it about the moon? That's actually common knowledge, the 9 evil Saint Emperor replied. At this moment, the Malice Spirit suddenly leaned in and asked the 9 evil Saint Emperor, I remember the Evil Ancestor told me you used to write a diary in a book. Do you still have it? Was that the diary? Unfortunately, it's been lost, the 9 evil Saint Emperor said helplessly. But if it were still around, I'd want to write one final entry, just to summarize things for myself. The Malice Spirit, still curious, asked, The Evil Ancestor also told me you came from a place called Earth. Can you tell me more about it? It seems the Evil Ancestor has told you everything, the 9 evil Saint Emperor said with a chuckle, then continued, Anyway, it's all the same. The Malice Spirit immediately sat in front of him, eager and full of curiosity, waiting for the story. Earth wasn't a very large place. It might have been just a little bigger than this island. The 9 evil Saint Emperor began to describe Earth, while the Evil Ancestor engaged in conversation with his attendant. Sure. You aren't from this world, are you? The Evil Ancestor asked. You've told me before, this world is just a bubble in the vast ocean. Yes, whether it's here or the world I came from, it's all just a bubble in the ocean. Compared to the ocean, we don't even count as specks of dust, Chen replied. The Central Herdsman Master probably doesn't know about this, does he? The Evil Ancestor asked. He might know, or he might not. After all, that guy is over there on their side, Chen said. Who is it? The Evil Ancestor asked. A guy named Yuan Cheng. I could tell right away he wasn't from this domain world. He carries an aura that couldn't have come from a single bubble world. Otherwise, there's no way he could command a lower realm alliance with that level of power. I believe he, like me, comes from another bubble world. That's why I've always suggested putting him at the top of the annihilation list, Chen explained. Though I don't know who he is, I never paid attention before. Do you think he's on the Central Herdsman Master's side? The Evil Ancestor asked. I don't think so. That's the part I'm most unsure about, Xun'er replied. He's had many opportunities to strike at the extraterritorial evil clan, but he never took action. His actions were always limited to helping the former Great Thousand World and Lower Realm World fend off the extraterritorial world. Even then, his resistance was quite neutral. He doesn't seem to want the extraterritorial world to suppress the Great Thousand World, but he also doesn't want the Great Thousand World to suppress the extraterritorial world. Are you trying to say something? Never mind, anything's possible now, the evil ancestor said, noticing the hidden meaning in Xun'er's words. If you ask me, Yuan Cheng's goal is probably to maintain the war between the Great Thousand World and the extraterritorial world. As for the benefits and the logic behind it, I don't understand, Xun'er added. That's certainly strange. Too bad we don't have much time left. Otherwise, I'd pay more attention to him, the evil ancestor said. As he spoke, he suddenly raised an eyebrow, as though he had noticed something. He looked toward the distant horizon. What's that? Looking at the distant sky, the evil ancestor asked with a puzzled expression. It seemed that, among the billions of stars, one particular star had suddenly begun to brighten. The increase in brightness continued for a few moments, eventually casting a shadow behind the evil ancestor. The sudden brightness of the star caught the attention of the 9 evil Saint Emperor and the Malice Spirit. The 9 evil Saint Emperor immediately turned his gaze toward it. His first thought was that it was a supernova explosion from his previous life, a rare phenomenon that only happens once every 100 years. He hadn't seen it in his past life, but now, here it was. As the star exploded with light, everyone fell silent. Except for Xun'er, everyone marveled at the sight. Xun'er, however, wore a strange expression. He didn't seem surprised. Instead, he looked puzzled, lowered his head, furrowed his brow, and began to think deeply. The brightness of the star lasted for several minutes before gradually fading, until the star itself completely disappeared. However, just over 10 minutes after that star disappeared, at the same spot as before, the bright star suddenly erupted again. This time, like the previous occurrences, it lasted only a few minutes before vanishing once more. Another 10 minutes later, the bright star appeared again, but this time it was different from the previous two. After stabilizing, its brightness did not show any signs of weakening. And so, whether it was tens of minutes or several hours later, even when the sky gradually brightened and day replaced night, the brightness of that star could still be seen. By the late hours of the next day, the evil ancestor and the others, who hadn't yet left the mountain, discovered that the bright star was still there. This was truly astonishing. On the second night, out of boredom, the slaughter ancestor even climbed the mountain. This star is probably referring to us, said the evil ancestor. If there truly is a supreme will, then I speculate that the first ignition and extinction of the star represent the first world-ending war tens of thousands of years ago, when we failed. The second ignition and extinction represent the second world-ending war several years ago, and we still failed. Now, the star is still shining, meaning we're not dead yet. But when it finally goes out, our calamity will have arrived. That makes sense, and it's interesting, agreed the 9 evil Saint Emperor. Anyway, we're all going to die, said the Malice Spirit with a forced smile. Not quite. Just then, a loud shout suddenly echoed through the mountain. The voice came from the attendant, who had been sitting and thinking for an entire day. The evil ancestor and the others turned to look, and to their surprise, they saw strange patterns on the ground in front of the attendant. The evil ancestor had no idea when the attendant had drawn these symbols. "What's wrong?" asked the evil ancestor. "It's not a star," replied the attendant. He turned to the others, his eyes narrowing slightly, and then spoke words that made them all pause in surprise. "We're saved." At the same time, several billion miles away, over a vast sea, a powerful army of over 10,000 strong warriors surged forward. The overwhelming pressure emanating from them caused towering waves to rise from the sea, and the very sky seemed to change color. As they traveled, everyone looked ahead in confusion, where a brilliant star had appeared. It amazed all of them. At that moment, it seemed as if the exploding star was guiding them. The central herdsman master, along with Xiao Yin, Lindong, and others, was at the front of this army. Originally, they could have directly transported to the Edgelands, but the central herdsman master had chosen to travel this way, and they would reach their destination in 2 days. Back then, I thank Martial Ancestor for the 3 years of protection you gave me. Without you, I wouldn't be where I am today, said the central herdsman master as they traveled. Honestly, I never expected you'd make it this far. You've exceeded my expectations, replied Martial Ancestor Lindong. No wonder Lin Jing speaks so highly of you. The central herdsman master smiled faintly. When he first left the northern spirit realm, he swore to become an unparalleled powerhouse. With such a vow, he naturally had to push himself to fulfill it. Flame Emperor's regret is probably that he couldn't leave behind the Doqi world, right? The central herdsman master turned to Flame Emperor Xiao Yin. After becoming the central entity of the domain world, he had learned of many things that had happened within it, including the splitting of the Doqi world and its eventual formation into the Do domain world. Xiao Yin, as the highest authority of the Do domain, had failed to protect the Do domain world. During the great calamity created by the malice spirit, the Do domain was crushed into pieces, with no hope of being restored, as it had completely merged into the current domain world. Heh, let the past be the past, Xiao Yin smiled faintly. He knew it was impossible to ask the central herdsman master to separate a Do domain again from the current domain world. However, after some thought, Xiao Yin added, Central herdsman master, there's something I need to discuss with you. Sure, I know everything I have now is because of the 2 seniors. If Flame Emperor has something to say, feel free, replied the central herdsman master. I want to protect someone, said Xiao Yin. Is it one of the remnants of the extraterritorial evil clan? The central herdsman master narrowed his eyes slightly but still asked, Who is it? Xiao Yin replied, His name is 9 Evil Saint Emperor. He can't die yet, at least not now. After thinking for a moment, the central herdsman master nodded. He can be dealt with as you see fit, Flame Emperor. The morning light of the following day broke through the night, casting long shadows behind the grand palace. A woman in a white dress stepped gracefully out of the hall. The silver-haired woman gently stroked her round belly. She gazed at the distant horizon, where a red sun was slowly rising. The woman smiled faintly. Luo Li, are you waiting for Chen to return? A hoarse voice came from within the hall. Hearing this, the silver-haired woman turned around, and then she saw an old man slowly walking out from the hall. It was her grandfather, Luo Heavenly God. The woman called Luo Li nodded slightly. This matter has already been settled. Originally, we could have used their so-called rules to directly erase all remnants of the extraterritorial evil clan, but Chen insists on using the old-fashioned method to wipe them out completely. Although this method may have some significance for this newly born world, we can only hope that no unexpected events occur. It seems unlikely that anything unexpected will happen now. Luo Heavenly God walked over to Luo Li's side. He looked at her protruding belly and smiled in a childlike manner. Chen, as a father, hasn't spent much time with you. He'll be back once he's done. It won't take long. Luo Li said, All right, I won't talk about your Chen anymore. You've really protected him well. Luo Heavenly God said, Grandfather, what are you saying? Luo Li blushed awkwardly. Don't think I don't understand your thoughts. Luo Heavenly God smiled slightly, then turned his gaze to the distant horizon. But for some reason, I always feel that something is about to happen. Now, we can only hope that Chen and the others will succeed. Luo Li listened and also looked at the distant sky. She gently stroked her belly and said softly, I believe in him. Chapter 2. Negotiation. Edgelands. After 2 days of traveling, Central Herdsman Master and his group finally arrived. They all stopped in midair, hovering above a sea. Before them lay a desolate island, with no paths leading anywhere. This was the last hiding place for the remnants of the extraterritorial evil clan. Upon their arrival, Central Herdsman Master immediately forced all the evil clan remnants hiding on the island to the edge of the island. On a flat beach, tens of thousands of evil clan remnants appeared in an instant, including the evil Ancestor and the 9 evil Saint Emperor. Once they arrived, they quickly surveyed their surroundings. Upon seeing the thousands of powerful beings on the sea's surface and Central Herdsman Master, they immediately understood the situation. The final judgment had arrived. At this moment, neither the evil Ancestor nor the 9 evil Saint Emperor showed any fear. However, the majority of the evil clan remnants, including the Slaughter Ancestor and the 2 great sacred emperors, could not conceal their fear. Quite impressive. We used to do this too, didn't we? The evil Ancestor said, looking at Central Herdsman Master and the others. Survival of the fittest. Although I don't like this phrase, it truly is a principle that applies everywhere. The 9 evil Saint Emperor said, his gaze shifting to Central Herdsman Master, before looking at the indifferent Flame Emperor Xiao Yin not far away. It seems I'm going to be eliminated by my own people. What an interesting ending. At this moment, Central Herdsman Master also looked at the evil Ancestor and the others. Behind him, the millions of domain world experts were already holding back, ready to strike at any moment. As soon as Central Herdsman Master gave the order, they would rush forward and use the most terrifying methods they could think of to eliminate the remnants of the extraterritorial evil clan. Everyone, it's been a few days since we last met. I wonder how you've been living here. If I'm not mistaken, this used to be your territory, right? Central Herdsman Master said to the evil Ancestor and the others. But now, there's no distinction between the Great Thousand World and the Domain World. Only this new and complete Domain World remains. I don't intend to say much more. If you had won the previous battle, you would have done exactly what we are doing. Fair enough. If we had won, we would have wiped you out completely, the 9 evil Saint Emperor said, glaring at Central Herdsman Master. He then added, so if you want to strike, just go ahead. We lost, we accept it. However, after the 9 evil Saint Emperor's words, Central Herdsman Master responded, as expected of someone the Flame Emperor asked to protect. You're fearless even in the face of danger. These words made many of the powerful experts behind him raise their eyebrows in surprise. They looked towards Flame Emperor Xiao Yin, not expecting him to protect a member of the extraterritorial evil clan at this critical moment. Wasn't this leaving a hidden danger for the world? The 9 evil Saint Emperor narrowed his eyes but smiled. All right then. I just happen to have some questions for the Flame Emperor. At that moment, the 9 evil Saint Emperor locked eyes with Xiao Yin. In the silence, it seemed like they were subtly testing each other. Now that the 9 evil Saint Emperor has been preserved, I assume you all are ready for what's to come? The Central Herdsman Master, after addressing Flame Emperor Xiao Yan's request, turned his gaze back to the evil Ancestor and others. Do you have any final words? Heh, no final words, just regrets, the evil Ancestor said with a faint smile. Regrets? You must regret not being able to rule the entire domain world, I presume, the Central Herdsman Master remarked. Such matters don't concern me. I just wanted to see what's outside, the evil Ancestor replied. Outside? I must disappoint you. Not long ago, I conducted a scan beyond the domain world, and the result was nothing. This domain world is merely a special region drifting in the dark void, said the Central Herdsman Master. Is that so? If there's nothing out there, then I have no regrets. From here on, I'll leave it to whatever happens next. The evil Ancestor turned to look at the Slaughter Ancestor and the Malice Spirit beside him. Do either of you have any requests? The Slaughter Ancestor sneered, as if to mock the idea of having final words at this point. Was there any meaning in it now? The Malice Spirit, on the other hand, began to feel a pang of guilt. If not for his reckless actions years ago, none of this would have happened. The worlds wouldn't have fused, the so-called Great Ruler wouldn't have emerged, and there wouldn't have been a central lord like Mu Chen. What he thought would be a decisive victory had now turned into a complete reversal. Evil Ancestor, do you think this is my fault? The Malice Spirit asked. Don't overestimate yourself, you fool. You haven't done enough to bring about the downfall of our entire clan, the evil Ancestor replied, then turned his gaze back to the Central Herdsman Master. Well then, Central Herdsman Master, do as you must. Hearing this, A cold smile appeared on the central herdsman master's lips. While the evil ancestor was indeed a formidable figure from the extraterritorial world deserving of respect, in this battle of life and death, he would show no mercy to his enemies. It was this ruthless demeanor that had allowed Chen to rise from the northern spirit realm to his current position. The central herdsman master slowly raised his hand, and behind him, millions of warriors erupted with an overwhelming killing intent, awaiting the central herdsman master's command to slash through all the extraterritorial remnants in their path. However, just as the central herdsman master's hand was about to fall, a strange life form suddenly emerged from behind the evil ancestor. This geometric life form, though appearing human-like on the surface, could alter its structure. In other words, its shape was not fixed. At this moment, it was clear that this life form intended to say something, but no one paid attention, as it was obvious that they had no more options left. But the geometric life form, stepping before the evil ancestor, suddenly addressed the central herdsman master. "Wait, I have a request." There was a brief pause as all attention shifted to this strange life form, and some sneered, as the life form appeared incredibly weak. The central herdsman master, intrigued by the peculiar nature of this being, became curious. Xiaoyan, too, was fascinated. The most unusual life form he had encountered before was the water life form, like the Western Heaven Battle Emperor, but this creature was unlike anything he had seen before. Moreover, he knew that this being was one of the decision-makers of the extraterritorial evil clan for thousands of years. It was called Xun'er. "Fine. I'll give you 10 seconds, the central herdsman master said. Upon receiving permission, Xun'er trembled. A rhomboid-shaped object fell from his body, and he began to scream in agony. This act resembled human self-mutilation, as if he were severing his own arm. Xun'er aimed the detached rhomboid body at himself and, looking at the central herdsman master, said, "Please allow me to end my own life." "What if I refuse?" The central herdsman master coldly smirked. After all, he controlled everything in the domain world, including who lived and who died. If he refused, no one could take their own life. "Actually, I'm not from your world. I was caught up in the chaos between the extraterritorial world and the Great Thousand Worlds. If I had fallen into the Great Thousand Worlds, I would have helped you. But if I fell into the extraterritorial world, I had no choice but to assist the extraterritorial evil clan," Xun'er said, his eyes scanning the millions of warriors behind the central herdsman master. "Heh, do you think we're fools?" Martial Ancestor Lin Dong let out a cold laugh at this moment, while Flame Emperor Xiaoyan narrowed his eyes, seemingly lost in thought. At this point, the Central Lord spoke. "If you want to die, that's not impossible. Whether you live or die makes no difference to me. But I noticed something. You're not from this world. So where are you from? I see nothing but void beyond the domain world. There's nothing there." "Heh. Thank you for the great kindness of the Central Shepherd Lord. As for your question, I can't answer it. Some things would be too difficult for you to accept right now, so it's better if you remain in the dark," the attendant replied with a smile, before suddenly thrusting the rhomboid object in their hand into their own body. The Central Shepherd Lord coldly laughed upon seeing this. The domain world was now completely under his control, and if the attendant wished to commit suicide, they would first have to get past him. The Central Shepherd Lord immediately issued an order using the central hub, intending to establish the highest rule to stop the attendant's actions. However, the next moment, his eyes narrowed in shock, for after the rule was set, the attendant's actions did not stop at all. Rules actually fail? The Central Shepherd Lord was initially stunned by the situation, but quickly recovered. He immediately gave up on using the convenient rule, turning instead to mobilize heaven and earth's spiritual energy to stop the attendant's suicide. But the speed at which he could mobilize the spiritual energy had a limit, and that limit was far too slow to prevent the attendant's suicide. As for resurrecting them after the deed was done, that was impossible, as the power of the rule had clearly failed just moments ago. The Central Shepherd Lord finally abandoned this ineffective approach. Since the attendant wanted to die and he couldn't stop it, he let them die. It wasn't as if he would lose anything. However, just as the Central Shepherd Lord gave up on stopping the attendant, The rhomboid object in the attendant's hand paused just before reaching their chest, then stopped entirely. What? Not going to kill yourself? Seeing the attendant halt their actions, the central shepherd lord was once again stunned. What exactly did this person intend? Even Flame Emperor Xiao Yan and martial ancestor Lin Dong were puzzled, along with the evil ancestor, 9 evil Saint Emperor, and everyone else present. No one knew what the attendant was doing or what they planned. But the evil ancestor and a few others recalled the attendant's words from late last night. They could still be saved. However, no reason was provided, and no one had taken those words seriously at the time. Central Lord, we need to negotiate. The attendant slowly inserted the rhomboid object back into their body, the movement excruciatingly slow. This act was, in essence, a suicide, but no one could tell when the attendant would die. You still need to tell me why the rules just now failed on you. And you may not even have the right to negotiate with me, the central shepherd lord replied. In the domain world, the rules and the central hub's power were supreme, nearly omnipotent. The fact that the rules had failed on the attendant was shocking, but the central shepherd lord was certain that there was no force greater than the rules within the attendant themselves. It must be something else, some unknown reason. I've already said it, the attendant replied. I'm not from this world, and those so-called rules only affect beings that belong to this world. The rules themselves were born from heaven and earth, but I exist beyond this realm. So, it's normal for the rules to fail. The central shepherd lord's gaze narrowed again. If the attendant truly wasn't from the domain world, and their words were true, then it meant there existed other unknown realms beyond the domain world, and the attendant clearly came from there. Behind the central shepherd lord, the millions of strong warriors exchanged confused glances. This was supposed to be a settled matter, yet now it was spiraling into strange and unexpected events. Could the attendant be stalling for time? It seems the central shepherd lord believes I have no leverage to negotiate with you right now, the attendant said. Or perhaps we have no other choice but to tell you everything you want to know in hopes of gaining a slim chance of survival. But I need to correct you, the attendant continued. Neither of us plans to survive. What do you mean? The central shepherd lord asked in a deep voice. The attendant grinned and responded. What I mean is, the choice now is whether we die first, or we all die together. You should think carefully, central shepherd lord, because when I say we, someone who can't even care for their own safety dares to worry about others' lives and deaths. Ridiculous. Behind the central herdsman master, both the ancestor of 10,000 spirits and the primordial divine ancestor sneered in mockery. Interesting. You actually think you can decide our lives and deaths? All right, let's talk then, and see what kind of leverage you think you have. The central herdsman master spoke, surprising those around him. Everyone had always seen him as a haughty figure, and in such an overwhelmingly imbalanced situation, where the power disparity was too vast to even compare, the fact that he chose to negotiate was completely out of character. The central herdsman master noticed the astonished looks around him. However, only he knew that the reason he acted this way was due to a strange premonition in his heart. He felt as if this person, daring to speak to him like this, had something up their sleeve that could truly lead to the destruction of the domain world. The evil ancestor and others were also having a hard time believing it. The central herdsman master had actually agreed to negotiate with this person. Since the central herdsman master is willing to talk, then let's set the conditions first. My condition is to tell you 3 valuable things, and in exchange, you must promise me 3 things, the person said. How can I be sure that your 3 things are valuable to me? The central herdsman master asked. That's easy. Let me start with the first thing, the person replied. If I'm not mistaken, central herdsman master, you should have already noticed that this newly born domain world is wrapped in an invisible layer, and surrounding it is a vast, empty darkness. There's not a single trace of energy or aura to be felt in this dark void, not even the so-called spatial force. Indeed, the central herdsman master nodded, while the flame emperor Xiao Yan and martial ancestor Lin Dong raised their brows slightly. They had never seen what lay outside the domain world, so they were both shocked by this description. But for the central herdsman master, things were different. When he became the core of the domain world, he truly experienced the feeling of what lay beyond it. Then, Central Herdsman Master, have you also noticed a strange phenomenon? The so-called sun, moon, and stars visible in this world cannot be seen beyond the domain world. The person continued. That's true. It is a strange phenomenon. The Central Herdsman Master nodded again. He had indeed noticed this. At first, he thought the sun, moon, and stars were carved onto the transparent membrane surrounding the domain world. But later, he realized that wasn't the case. So, the valuable thing you want to tell me is just this? So, the first valuable thing I can tell you, Central Herdsman Master, is that the place where this domain world is located is an area whose size no one knows for certain, but its scale far exceeds anything anyone here could imagine. In my former world, it was called the Vast Expanse, and whether it's this domain world or my former world, they are merely tiny bubbles in that vast expanse. The person said, the reason you can't sense other existences outside the domain world is because the distance between each bubble world and the vast expanse is almost thousands or tens of thousands of world scales, and one world scale is the diameter of a bubble world. Upon hearing this, the entire place fell silent. The Central Herdsman Master, Flame Emperor Xiao Yin, and Martial Ancestor Lin Dong exchanged glances. This silence lasted for a few breaths before it was replaced by bursts of laughter. The person's words seemed so absurd to everyone that they couldn't help but laugh. Heh, you're quite an interesting guy, but the holes in your story are too big, the Central Herdsman Master said, looking at the person not far away. He gave a helpless smile, clearly finding the person's words nothing but a joke. He then asked the question that everyone was thinking. Since we're in the vast expanse, where's the sea? The fish? Heh, are there seaweeds too? It seems the Central Herdsman Master doesn't take me seriously, the person said, ignoring the mocking laughter. Well, it's understandable. For you, if the world really is like that, it would indeed be ridiculous. You, who once ruled a world, would suddenly become so insignificant. The person continued, but the vast expanse is not the sea. It's a battlefield. Almost no bubble world can coexist with another. For a world to survive, it must ruthlessly eliminate other worlds. Oh, a battlefield? Now that's interesting. What kind of battlefield is it? To put it directly, perhaps no one would believe it, but if the Central Herdsman Master, you have some time to spare, could you conduct a simple experiment with me? Sure said. Upon hearing this, the Central Herdsman Master frowned slightly. Although what Sure said sounded absurd, he felt that Sure wasn't speaking recklessly. The Central Herdsman Master glanced at the Flame Emperor Xiao Yin and Martial Ancestor Lin Dong, hoping to gauge their thoughts. He's right. We do indeed have the time, so I'm curious to see what valuable information he wants to share, said Flame Emperor Xiao Yin. The Central Herdsman Master nodded and turned back to Sure. What kind of experiment are you suggesting? He asked. As the Central Herdsman Master responded, Evil Ancestor, 9 Evil Saint Emperor, and Slaughter Ancestor, among others, were all in disbelief. Sure actually managed to gain some initiative in his conversation with the Central Herdsman Master. Please, Central Herdsman Master, take something with weight and travel to the void beyond the domain world. The farther from the domain world, the better. Then, place these items in midair and observe their movement, Sure said. If the outer space truly is a void, these items will likely float aimlessly in the void without a direction. I also need to remind you that the rules within the world will fail outside, but the spiritual energy that was carried out from within the body can still be used. And the actual result? The Central Herdsman Master asked after listening carefully. Since Sure had put it this way, it was likely the outcome would be beyond his expectations. The Central Herdsman Master had never tried to establish rules outside the domain world. There are 2 possible results. First, any material object will sink in a certain direction. This suggests that even the vast ocean has its own top and bottom, though no front, back, left, or right. The second result is as I mentioned. The rules will fail in the ocean of the void, Sure replied. And there's one more thing I can predict. I believe once the Central Herdsman Master ventures outside, you'll encounter something interesting. What interesting thing? The Central Herdsman Master inquired. You'll know for yourself once you go. It would be far more credible than me explaining it, Shi said. The central herdsman master fell silent for a moment. After a few breaths, he turned to Flame Emperor Xiao Yin and Martial Ancestor Lin Dong. I leave the matters here to the two seniors. Mu Chun, you must be cautious. The tricks of the extraterritorial evil clan are not to be underestimated, Martial Ancestor Lin Dong warned the central herdsman master. Having once been attacked by a branch of the evil clan in the Tianqian dimension, Lin Dong was no stranger to their deceitful tactics and had no trust in their words. Brother Lin Dong, perhaps you are overthinking it. Since Shi dares to wager his life on this, I look forward to seeing the results the central herdsman master will obtain, Flame Emperor Xiao Yin said. Indeed, as Senior Flame Emperor said, if nothing comes of it, I will return and immediately deal with these people. But in the end, they've only delayed their deaths by a few minutes, which isn't a big deal, the central herdsman master said, then immediately set off. With a flick of his hand, dozens of mountains on the island before him were uprooted, and in the next instant, both the mountains and the central herdsman master vanished into the vast expanse. Meanwhile, at the edge of the domain world, the central herdsman master appeared with the mountains. Before him was an invisible barrier, behind which was a blue sky, white clouds, and a blazing sun. But the central herdsman master knew that everything before him would vanish once he crossed this barrier, and the reason was unknown. This barrier could be called the blast membrane, as it prevented anything from the domain world from leaking out. No one had ever managed to cross it before the worlds fused as one, and the stronger one was, the greater the backlash they would receive. Currently, there were only 3 people capable of crossing this blast membrane: the central herdsman master, Flame Emperor Xiao Yin, and Martial Ancestor Lin Dong. The central herdsman master extended his hand, and at that moment, the blast membrane before him rippled as if disturbed, like the surface of water. After passing through the blast membrane barrier, the scorching daylight that had been in front of him indeed disappeared, just as the central herdsman master had predicted, replaced by an impenetrable darkness. At this moment, the central herdsman master immediately began the first experiment and established a rule. He decreed that everything around them would transform into brightness. However, the central herdsman master's gaze quickly narrowed, for the surrounding darkness remained unbroken. This directly confirmed the accuracy of a certain claim made by his subordinate. In this so-called dark ocean, the rules would be ineffective. It seems this guy really knows something, muttered the central herdsman master to himself. Although he had anticipated that his subordinate's claim might be correct, he was still slightly surprised when it was actually proven. He hadn't expected that the almost omnipotent rules of the domain world would fail to work once they left. This clarified that the subordinate's identity was not simple. But what about the truth of his other statements? After confirming the ineffectiveness of the rules, the central herdsman master quickly activated the spiritual energy within his body. As the master of the central domain in the domain world, his spiritual energy reserves were several times greater than that of a perfected heavenly supreme. So when he unleashed his energy, the light that erupted from him directly illuminated the surrounding darkness. However, the darkness was simply too vast, boundless even. So the area he illuminated was only a few tens of millions of miles in radius. Compared to the immense domain world behind him, it was like a tiny firefly. But after activating his spiritual energy, the central herdsman master immediately witnessed something astonishing. The mountains that had left the domain world with him had already drifted far off into the distance, moving away at an incredible speed. All the mountains were moving in the same direction, clearly being pulled by some force. However, this force did not seem to be gravity, as Mu Chun himself did not sink. This confirmed what his subordinate had said. Where exactly is this place? Looking at the direction where the dozens of mountains were rapidly moving away, the central herdsman master was somewhat amazed. If the direction below was where they were heading, then the opposite direction must be upwards. He looked upwards but saw only endless darkness. Then, he turned and gazed at the domain world behind him. This was his first time truly looking back at the domain world from the outside. The last time, he had only glanced at it through the central hub. Truly magnificent. Facing the domain world before him, the central herdsman master felt as if he were facing a colossal wall. He quickly backed away, trying to get a full view of the domain world. After retreating an unknown distance, the central herdsman master finally saw the full scope of the domain world, and its appearance made him pause in surprise. It was exactly as his subordinate had described. It was an enormous bubble, with a thin membrane on its surface reflecting a faint light. Behind the membrane was a vast blue expanse, with numerous areas marked by brown and green, clearly continents floating on an ocean. The once vast and boundless domain world was now directly before the central herdsman master, with all the continents and oceans placed on a single plane, right in the center of this gigantic bubble. The domain world truly was a bubble-like world. All the countless world-ending wars and stories of great heroes and powerful beings from the past thousands of years had all unfolded within this bubble. As the central herdsman master was astonished by the full view of the domain world, a flickering light in the far back of the domain world immediately caught his attention. What is that? Looking at the flickering light at the back of the domain world, the central herdsman master was shocked. This vast ocean of darkness had so far only been pierced by the light emanating from the domain world itself. When he adjusted his position, he noticed that the light seemed to be very far away from the domain world. Could it be? The central herdsman master stared at the distant flickering light, and a thought emerged in his mind that shocked even him. In the domain world, at the edge of the land, on a lone island's coast, everyone was waiting for the return of the central herdsman master. However, the powerful figures from the domain world who had followed the central herdsman master were clearly dissatisfied. They had come here with the purpose of eradicating the remnants of the extraterritorial evil clan, which would serve as the most direct response to the attacks they had endured over the past tens of thousands of years. Yet now, due to some inexplicable words from a servant, the central herdsman master had called off the original plan of action. Some of the domain world experts sneered inwardly, thinking that what the servant said was utterly impossible, even ridiculous. They believed that once the central herdsman master returned, all the answers would be revealed. At that time, none of the remnants of the extraterritorial evil clan would escape. Brother Xiaoyan, do you really believe that guy's words? While they waited, Martial Ancestor Lin Dong asked the Flame Emperor Xiaoyan. I don't believe all of it, but don't forget, this servant has been the decision-maker of the extraterritorial world for tens of thousands of years. Even the fusion of the lower dimensions was his idea. He's not an ordinary person. So, while we can't trust everything he says, we can't dismiss it entirely either. In the end, we'll have to make our own judgment, replied the Flame Emperor Xiaoyan. I hope he wasn't lying, Martial Ancestor Lin Dong said, glancing toward the coast ahead. Because of the servant's intervention, the remnants of the extraterritorial evil clan had temporarily relaxed. The evil ancestor and the 9 evil saint emperor, like the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor, were also waiting for the return of the central herdsman master. Heh, I actually hope he's lying, Flame Emperor Xiaoyan smiled faintly. As his voice faded, a flash of light appeared on the horizon, and a figure, coming from the blast membrane barrier, crossed space and reappeared before the domain world's experts. It was the central herdsman master. In the cave, the flickering candlelight gently swayed, casting the shadow of a figure sitting cross-legged with closed eyes. A year ago, after everything in the domain world had returned to normal, Yuan Cheng entered this cave. He no longer wished to go outside, for in his view, there was nothing left for him in the world, and the efforts he had made for years had been declared a failure several years prior. Yuan Cheng, you have something on your mind. A voice came from outside the cave, and soon a young man dressed in white entered. He was none other than the former leader of the Great Thousand Alliance, Nan Tianzi. It's nothing, you don't need to worry about it. Yuan Cheng slowly opened his eyes and looked at the young man in white, the former Great Thousand Alliance leader, Nan Tianzi. By the way, the central herdsman master and his group have already taken action. I believe the remnants of the extraterritorial evil clan have already been wiped out at the edge of the land, Nan Tianzi said, walking up to Yuan Cheng and sitting down. The world has certainly become much more peaceful now, thanks to the establishment of order. Order? That's just a surface phenomenon. From the moment we entered the battlefield, this world was destined for destruction, Yuan Cheng replied. Battlefield? Yuan Cheng, you should understand the current situation in the domain world, right? Once the remnants of the extraterritorial evil clan are completely eradicated, this world will fall under the rule of the central herdsman master, entering a true era of no warfare. Anyone who attempts to start a war will be crushed by the central herdsman master. The power involved here is not on the same level, Nantianzi said. My battlefield isn't the battlefield within the domain world. Forget it, there are some things you're better off not knowing. For now, we'll just take it one day at a time, Yuan Cheng said. Yes, life itself is about taking it one day at a time. And what's wrong with that? Nantianzi replied. But you've been staying in this cave for so long, not even practicing. It's like you're avoiding something. So, I'm asking if you have something on your mind. There are things on my mind, but they're nothing worth mentioning, and I have no interest in talking about them, Yuan Cheng said. Since you don't want to talk, I won't press. By the way, are you sure you don't want to go out and take a look at the strange celestial phenomenon? It's a once-in-a-millennium event, Nantianzi said. I'm not interested in seeing it, but I'm bored. Why don't you tell me about it? Yuan Cheng said. Heh, I saved you once, and now I have to take responsibility for telling you stories and reporting on the outside world? Nantianzi said with a look that seemed to regard Yuan Cheng as a child. Since you want to hear it, I'll tell you. One day ago, a strange star appeared in the sky. Its brightness suddenly increased, and now it's still hanging out there, like a second sun, Nantianzi said. A bright star? Hearing Nantianzi's words, Yuan Cheng, who had been indifferent before, suddenly seemed to notice something. Indeed, the sudden appearance of the bright star is an unprecedented phenomenon. However, according to rumors, it should herald the rise of the Central Lord and the downfall of the extraterritorial evil clan. Haha, it seems there truly is such a thing as destiny, Nantianzi remarked. Wait a moment. As soon as Nantianzi finished speaking, Yuan Cheng intervened, immediately standing up and striding toward the entrance of the cave, as if eager to uncover something. What's wrong? Did I say something wrong? Nantianzi was taken aback by Yuan Cheng's sudden and unusual behavior. Having spent over a year in the cave, Yuan Cheng now wanted to go out. What was going on? With this question in mind, Nantianzi quickly followed Yuan Cheng outside. Upon exiting the dim cave, Yuan Cheng immediately scanned the surroundings, and at that moment, Nantianzi also stepped out, puzzled by Yuan Cheng's urgency. Yuan Cheng soon spotted what he was looking for, a shimmering light on the distant horizon. This light was not as intense as the sun, but it was bright enough to penetrate the blue sky for Yuan Cheng to see clearly. See that? That's the star. It will shine even brighter at night. Nantianzi pointed at the distant glow and asked, What do you see? After Nantianzi's question, Yuan Cheng continued to gaze intently at the light without responding, leaving Nantianzi in the dark about Yuan Cheng's thoughts. After a few moments, Yuan Cheng finally smiled and said, I always knew this day would come, but I didn't expect it to be so soon. In the domain world, on the fringe realms. What is that? Upon returning from outside the domain world, the Central Lord addressed his attendant, anxious for news about what had just transpired. The Central Lord must already have the answer in mind, right? What you saw is that so-called star in this world, and by now, you should realize it's not a star at all, the attendant replied. Then you're not from this world. Is that place your hometown? The Central Lord asked. Hee, my hometown has been destroyed. I will never see it again, the attendant said. But I believe you have personally verified the matters from earlier. Indeed, as you said, in that so-called vast ocean outside, the rules of this world do not apply, and the objects I took with me have indeed moved in a specific direction, the Central Lord replied. Hearing this, the Flame Emperor Xiaoyan, Martial Ancestor Lin Dong, and others exchanged glances, realizing that the Central Lord had experienced something extraordinary out there. At that moment, the Central Lord inquired, But I'm quite curious, where will those objects ultimately land? Sorry, I don't know, the attendant responded. Then the light I saw is another world within that vast ocean? The Central Lord asked. looking up at the distant flickering light. Another world? The Flame Emperor and martial Ancestor furrowed their brows at the Central Lord's statement. Since the domain world had completely merged, the so-called other world must be outside the domain world. Central Lord, since you've seen that world, you might as well share it with them, because the task ahead will require the cooperation of all of you to accomplish, the attendant suggested. The Central Lord nodded and turned to the others. The Flame Emperor, martial Ancestor, and others gathered around, curiosity evident on their faces as they wanted to know what Mu Chen had witnessed in that other world. Mu Chen, what did you see? The Flame Emperor voiced the question that was on everyone's mind. Hearing this, Mu Chen replied, Esteemed ones, after becoming the central figure of this world, I discovered something curious. He surveyed the surroundings of the world and continued, Many things we see here, just like the sun, moon, and stars, and the vast Milky Way, become invisible once we leave this world, leading me to speculate that these things are merely inscribed in the sky. Everyone, Mu Chen assures, in the name of the Central Hub, that what was previously stated is indeed true. The Central Lord observed the reactions from all present and reiterated his statement. His words caused everyone to frown, clearly indicating that the Central Lord's claims far exceeded their understanding and expectations. If such words had come from someone else, they might have been dismissed, but the Central Lord was not one to joke about such matters, especially not while guaranteeing it in the name of the Central Hub. But the sun, moon, and stars all move and change, questioned the Ancestor of 10,000 spirits. And if they were merely inscribed in the heavens, then if we got closer, we should be able to see magnified versions of the sun, moon, and stars. This is indeed a perplexing issue for me, replied the Central Lord. However, I cannot explain it at this moment. I can only confirm that these things cannot be seen beyond this world. What does that mean? Inquired the Flame Emperor. The true significance does not lie with the familiar sun, moon, and stars, but rather with something that has only recently appeared. The Central Lord pointed toward a distant shimmering light in the sky, prompting everyone to follow his gaze. What is that? What the Central Lord indicated was undoubtedly the bright star that had appeared in the sky just a day prior. As everyone stared at the bright star, the Central Lord made a statement that left them all astonished. According to what I just observed, any celestial body outside this world cannot be seen, except for this one. When I was outside this world, it was the only one shining brightly. Are you saying the other world you referred to is? The primordial divine Ancestor and others finally understood. Exactly. If that entity is correct, then the only world visible from outside would be one identical to ours. These worlds, like ours, are encased in an invisible bubble membrane, and the light we see is merely a reflection from the bubble membrane of another world. The Central Lord explained to everyone. Wait, then where does the light reflected by the bubble membrane come from? The martial Ancestor interjected. I do not know, the Central Lord replied. If that's the case, does it imply that there exists a much broader space outside, where bubble worlds similar to ours can also be found? Asked the Flame Emperor. I cannot ascertain if the external space is akin to here, but I felt no trace of energy outside. Not even the spatial force was perceptible. All that could be utilized there was the most primitive of powers, while rules, indeed, seemed to be ineffective, the Central Lord elaborated. The most primitive power. Is that spiritual energy? The Flame Emperor recalled Mu Chen's earlier descriptions, remembering his own experience breaking through the dimensional constraints of the continent of Do-Chi. If there were numerous bubble worlds, similar to the domain worlds adrift in that so-called vast ocean, wouldn't that be akin to the previous lower dimensional worlds? Could it be that there exists an even higher great thousand worlds? That perhaps, beyond each world, a higher level would materialize? Would this extension continue indefinitely? Thinking about this made the Flame Emperor involuntarily take a deep breath. At this moment, the Central Lord turned his gaze once more to the attendant nearby. What is your first condition? He asked the attendant. The many strong figures behind him were taken aback, realizing that the Central Lord was genuinely considering a deal with these extraterritorial remnants. The evil Ancestor and others also found it hard to believe, clearly astonished by the decision made at this critical moment. Hey, the Central Lord is indeed a person of principle. My first condition is something you can easily fulfill, the attendant chuckled. What is it? The Central Lord asked. My first condition is that you must restore the original powers of the evil ancestor and his group, the attendant replied. His proposal sent a shockwave through everyone once more, especially among the myriad experts from the domain worlds behind the Central Lord. They had come here to eradicate all remnants of the extraterritorial evil clan, and restoring the powers of these remnants would undoubtedly complicate matters. At this moment, even Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor's eyes narrowed slightly. The first condition servant proposed was truly challenging everyone's limits. Aren't you afraid I'll go back on my word? The Central Herdsman Master asked coldly, looking at servant. If you want to backtrack, there's nothing I can do to stop you. Right? So it's entirely up to you, servant replied. So you're taking a gamble, the Central Herdsman Master said, a faint smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. How could he not know what servant was planning? According to his deduction, servant's second condition likely involved letting the evil ancestor and his forces leave the domain world. At that time, since rules could not be enforced in the vast expanse, the restored evil ancestor and his forces would actually be able to impact the domain world. In the rule-less vast expanse, all contests relied purely on primal forces like evil chi and spiritual energy. Before losing his powers, the evil ancestor had already been an upper ruler, not inferior to the Central Herdsman Master or the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor in terms of raw power. Fine. I'll agree to your condition. The Central Herdsman Master unexpectedly accepted servant's first condition. As his words fell, without any visible action, the evil ancestor and all the remnants of the evil clan by the distant coast felt their stripped powers swiftly returning. You really did it, the evil ancestor said to servant. At this moment, he and the 9 evil Saint Emperor sensed a sudden reconnection, a restoration of their severed link with heaven and earth. The fundamental difference between rulers and cultivators lay in this. Cultivators stole a trace of heaven and earth's power and prided themselves on it. But rulers did not follow the path of cultivation. They lived as one with heaven and earth, supported by it. They were true spokespeople of the heavens, capable of acting on its behalf. Boom. The remnants of the evil clan, ecstatic with their restored powers, unleashed them recklessly. Among them were over 100 heavenly emperors and over 1,000 earth sovereigns. Such power caused the entire surrounding region, spanning tens of millions of miles, to tremble violently. At this moment, all the remnants of the evil clan, including the evil ancestor, soared into the sky, standing behind servant as if declaring themselves his most steadfast support. On the opposing side, thousands of domain world experts warily observed these remnants, though the expressions of the Central Herdsman Master, Flame Emperor, and Martial Ancestor remained calm. You're quite something, probably the smartest person I've met since coming to this world, the 9 evil Saint Emperor said beside servant. I thought everyone in this world was a fool. 9 evil Saint Emperor, watch your words, the Slaughter Ancestor growled angrily from the side. It was clear he knew the Saint Emperor's remark included him. I'm just speaking the truth. I wasn't specifically targeting you. It's just that most people here are exactly as I described, the 9 evil Saint Emperor said disdainfully, his words clearly heard by the domain world experts. What an arrogant fellow, Martial Ancestor said, his eyes filled with killing intent. He had always despised those who looked down on others from a lofty position. Let him be, Flame Emperor said indifferently. Having already interacted with the 9 evil Saint Emperor, he was well aware of some of the secrets this individual held. I've fulfilled your first condition. Now can you tell me the second matter? The Central Herdsman Master asked servant amidst the standoff. Of course. The second matter is built upon the previous discussion. If I'm not mistaken, based on your explanation, some of you must be speculating. If the domain world is merely one among countless bubble worlds, then this situation is similar to the former lower dimensions. And above all these bubble worlds, there must be an even higher world waiting for us to break through to, servant stated, echoing the Flame Emperor's earlier guess. However, What he said next once again shattered everyone's expectations. Unfortunately, first, that so-called higher world waiting for you to break through to doesn't exist, or at least, not to my knowledge. Second, among the countless bubble worlds in the vast expanse, all bubble worlds are essentially the same and equal. Upper rulers, the highest figures in the domain world, also exist in other worlds. Each world naturally has its own unique central position. If you're still hoping to reach a level beyond the upper ruler, I'm sorry to disappoint you. In the vast expanse, rulers are already the pinnacle of every bubble world's hierarchy. The words of the attendant echoed across the scene. While the many rulers present could understand, the others remained oblivious. However, the Flame Emperor, the Central Herdsman Master, and their peers felt a complex mix of emotions. If there were no higher worlds left to ascend to, and the ruler stage was the absolute peak, then this meant they had reached the very end. For someone content with a peaceful life, this might have been a comforting conclusion. But for those like the Central Herdsman Master, who constantly pursued progress and sought new paths forward, this was far from welcome news. From this moment on, nothing could ignite their blood with the same fervor. In the past, an ending had always signified a new beginning. But now, this ending, perhaps it was truly the final one. Heh, do you really think you can just settle down like this? Just as the Central Herdsman Master, the Flame Emperor, and the Martial Ancestor felt a tinge of disappointment, the attendant suddenly spoke again. The vast expanse is a battlefield, a chaotic, lawless battlefield. The dangers and challenges you will face will be far more terrifying than you can imagine. What do you mean? The Central Herdsman Master and the others immediately inquired. Don't you wonder? If the world beyond isn't an ocean as you understand it, then why is it called the vast expanse? The attendant asked. Why? The Central Herdsman Master questioned again. The attendant grinned, a manic glint flashing in his eyes. Do you know what a mass contest is? Somewhere in the domain world, in a concealed location, the ground stretched endlessly into a smooth, polished plaza. Above, the sky was a brilliant blue, with wisps of white clouds drifting lazily. On this vast plaza stood an enormous stone statue, millions of feet tall. It depicted an elderly man, not with an imposing or severe expression, but one that exuded warmth and approachability. At last, it's finally done. A cheerful voice rang out from atop the statue. The speaker was a boy with fiery red hair, seated upon the statue's shoulder. Those guys were way too reckless. They actually destroyed the Lord's 1,000 realms, another voice responded. A streak of lightning flashed through the air, landing on the statue's outstretched palm. A second boy appeared, his body covered in intricate lightning patterns. Thunder Boy clapped his hands, and a crystal emerged, levitating above the elder's palm. It was a glass-like crystal. When the brilliant sunlight hit its surface, it refracted into dazzling, multicolored rays. After placing it down, Thunder Boy leaped to join Fire Boy, both standing atop the statue's shoulder. Their gazes turned toward the distant sky, where a bright star twinkled on the horizon. Fire, what if this world is destroyed before the Lord returns? Thunder Boy asked. Don't overthink it. Our only job is to safeguard this crystal. The Lord said it was a gift from someone called Ghost, Fireboy replied. But looking at things now, I can't shake the feeling that disaster is coming, Thunder Boy muttered, eyes fixed on the distant star. Even if it does, it's not our problem. That guy called the Flame Emperor already promised us, Fireboy said confidently.